So, and I make this example. I say, look, if you are in the VA system, this is what they try to do to you. You have no control over who your doctor is. You have no control over your hospital. You have no control over your specialist. You either do what they tell you to do, you wait and go where they want to, and if you complain, they have a process to ostracize you and kick you out of the medical center. I've had veterans who have complained loudly to management, and they were given a letter saying that you will go to counseling, which I call re-education camp, or you will not be allowed in the medical center. Or I've had veterans who have been told that, hey, you said a cuss word because you were being mistreated, and you can only go to the medical center if you are VA police escort you, sort of things. Yeah, they at the extremes, they have very totalitarian dictatorship ways.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on The State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of The State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
If you're looking to invest in physical precious metals or convert your 401k to a precious metals-backed IRA, please consider making your investment with our trusted partner, MetalStacks. Their prices regularly beat the big sites, and they have no credit card fees or minimums. Shipping is free for orders over $500. Just visit metalstacks.com/dwalker or get there from our website, freedomstate.us. If you're interested in the IRA conversion, drop me a message at Danielle at freedomstate.us and I can get you connected with their white glove service. Welcome to the State of Freedom, everybody. We are so happy to be with you. And just as a reminder, the State of Freedom, we are grounded in faith and the Constitution. We're giving voice to truth, living with courage, and taking action. It's Tuesday, October 1st. It's 10 a.m. Central. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my friend and fellow warrior for truth, Chris Alexander. We're coming to you live on Voice of the People, USA TV and radio network on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. If you're looking for an audio-only version of us, you can always catch us the day after we go live on our podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcast. Well, today we're going to talk about the state of our veterans and what needs to be done to get them the timely and quality health care that they deserve. Our guest today, let me bring him up. Oh my goodness. All right. Our guest today is Senior Advisor to Veteran Action, Darren Selnick. Darin is a U.S. Air Force veteran who most recently served as Deputy Chief of Staff to the Secretary of Defense, and he performed the duties of the Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. He has a long history of serving in roles to improve the lives of our soldiers and our veterans within the Department of Defense and Department of Veterans Affairs, and in consultative roles to both of those agencies. Welcome to the show, Darin.
Thanks. Great to be on. Appreciate it.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. Well, before we get started, let me read the scripture of the day. It is Romans chapter 4, verses 4 through 5. And it says, let's see if I can find it. When people work, they earn wages. It can't be considered a free gift because they earned it. But no one earns God's righteousness. It can only be transferred when we no longer rely on our own works, but believe in the one who powerfully declares the ungodly to be righteous in his eyes. It is faith that transfers God's righteousness into your account. And God loves it when we serve one another, when we do work that blesses his children, that encourages his ministers, that beautifies our community, when we do work that strengthens and unites and brings a sense of security to our families. But no amount of work will be enough for any of us to be declared righteous. Psalm 53 and Romans chapter 3 tell us that not one is righteous, that all have turned aside from the Lord and his ways, And that's why Jesus, the only sinless and perfect human, came to be a sacrifice for us so we could be made the righteousness of God. It's Jesus who is our righteousness, and his righteousness, his unblemished perfection, is transferred to us by faith when we acknowledge that we're sinful and when we put our trust in him. That's when the miraculous transfer takes place. He receives our sin that he already paid the full price for, and we receive his righteousness and forgiveness that makes us whole. So my encouragement today is keep being a blessing. Keep doing good work that honors the Lord, but fully and completely put your trust in him and his finished work on the cross, because that is what transforms you, and that's what brings eternal security.
100%, Danielle. That's exactly right. As you were praying there, as you were reading the scripture, I was thinking the only reason why we have the freedom to pray on this show, the only reason why we have the freedom to worship in this country without government persecution is because of our war heroes. It's because of our military veterans who have engaged in acts of heroism that are unparalleled, and also who have seen the horrors of war like nobody else has seen. And yet our Veterans Administration in the United States, unfortunately, too often treats them like second and third and fourth class citizens, and has been doing so for many, many years. And I think that it's an absolute disgrace. And I know that someone who is very concerned about that and works, constantly to improve the Veterans Administration as a consultant is our guest today, Darren Selnick, Captain Darren Selnick. Darren, thank you for joining us today on the State of Freedom, sir.
Well, it's great to be here, and it's great to talk about a subject that I love and work so hard on.
You obviously are a military veteran, and I'm sure that that's only one of the reasons why you have such a sensitivity to this issue. What did President Trump inherit from Biden with regard to the competency of the Veterans Administration? It appears as though during his administration, veteran suicides increased statistically. And just kind of describe, if you will, what President Trump inherited from Joe Biden on this issue.
Yeah, the challenge for President Trump is he inherited a bad VA twice. So I was in Trump 1 as senior advisor to VA, and then went over to the White House as the Veterans Affairs Advisor to the President Domestic Policy Council. And so he inherited from Obama a broken down VA, that veterans had long waits, the bureaucracy. Basically, what Democrats like to do is try to make VA healthcare the only socialized healthcare in the country. And we know that socialized healthcare doesn't work. So under Trump 1, we were really significantly fixing up VA, the big fixer-upper. If you watch those HGTV shows, you got the big fixer-upper here, then the prior tenants have really trashed the place. And so we did the thing called the Mission Act. And the Mission Act said we're going to massively reform VA healthcare to make it veteran-centric. And so there are horror stories in Phoenix, veterans having long wait times, being on secret wait lists, having, literally not being able to get care and dying of cancer and those sorts of things. So there's big scandals. We did the Mission Act, which gave veterans the first choice. So if you're in healthcare, if you're a patient, even in DOD, you can pick the plan that you want. You can pick the provider you want. If I don't like Camp Pendleton, which I go to, I can pick up a PPO. If you've been historically in the VA, it was the only socialized healthcare in the country. And when government controls all the decisions in your healthcare, you get bad healthcare when they're unaccountable.
Yeah.
So the Mission Act addressed all those things. It was the greatest transformation of VA healthcare in over a generation. And the veterans liking the VA skyrocketed. They came back, they started using it, and they had full choice. And what that meant was we borrowed, being a military guy, I borrowed the things that worked well in DOD for VA. And we established things like the access standards that said you would never have to drive too far or wait too long to get health care. And that it would put it in the veteran's hand, not in the bureaucrats. So that happened, and we had massive reform, and veterans were coming back, and it was doing really well. And then Biden took over. The Biden people use COVID to say, hey, we're going to undo all the president's achievements in the VA, both in accountability and choice. And accountability is important because if you fail veterans, you should be held accountable. Bad employees should be fired. And so they brazenly stood up in a congressional testimony and said, we're not going to follow Trump's accountability anymore. We're just not going to do it. And they made a deal with the unions. And so if you have bad employees, it hurts your healthcare. And there's a lot of good employees and it hurts the good employees. So under Biden, they said, hey, as you've seen in other areas in immigration and whatnot, it's not just VA. They said, Mission Act, we don't care what the Mission Act says. We're just not going to follow it. We're not going to go ahead and let veterans have their choice anymore. Let me give you a couple examples. I think it's easier to give a couple examples of what the Biden people did. There's a veteran, and I'm going to use Louisiana as my first example. There's a veteran in Louisiana who under the Trump was having good community care. Now, he is a legally blind veteran, and so he needed a provider close to where he lived. The closest VA facility was over a 60-minute drive. And he's very elderly. He's legally blind. His wife is elderly, has a hard time driving. So he had community care. He was very happy with his community care. And then under Biden, they said, you know what? We're not going to let you have that community care anymore. We're going to make
And Darin, for the benefit of everyone watching who's not a veteran, can you talk a little bit about the difference between going to a VA office and what community care is?
Right. So there's VA facilities. You have your hospitals and your clinics. That's run by the VA and their staff. And then there is community care, which is like a traditional HMO network of community providers, which are credentialed and have a contract with the VA. And so if the VA can't, for several reasons, if they are too far away, or if they are too long of a wait, like a 30-day, 50-day, 60-day wait, or it's in the best medical interest of the veteran, say, for example, they are blind and can't drive 50 miles. So there's this eligibility criteria that the veteran has the choice. Do they want to use the VA facility or they want to select a community provider near where they live?
Do they have to first go through the VA and all that frustration and bureaucratic nonsense before they can choose the second option?
They have to be a VA patient. And for certain things, they have to get a referral, such as dermatology, specialty care, mental health. If it's urgent care or emergency care, they just go straight to the closest contracted provider and they're good to go. But yes, that's part of the problem. And ultimately, down the road, we would like to get to full choice where you can be enrolled in the VA healthcare system and you can always just pick either the VA or the community provider and not have a bureaucrat saying, hey, I don't, because that's been the problem. The problem is the Biden people said, you know what, we're not going to follow the law, which says if the veteran is eligible for community care, they have the choice to pick it and we can't stop them. Instead, what they did to this blind veteran was say, you know what, too many veterans are using community care. And so we're going to tell you can't do it. And I interceded, and they, after a long struggle of me interceding and a good social worker who was an Army veteran at the hospital interceding, they finally went ahead and say, okay, yeah, we're not going to make him drive 60 minutes because he's blind. It's just ludicrous. In Arkansas, I had a veteran who needed an immediate placement in residential mental health and substance abuse. He was homeless. He had been kicked out because of his drug habit from his family for stealing. And the VA, I got a call, because I get calls from having been in the VA and doing podcasts like this. People track me down and they say, I got this problem. Can you help me? And what the VA did was they said, hey, they agreed, you need immediate placement in residential mental health inside. This is in Fayetteville, Arkansas. But we don't have any openings for over 30 days. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We'll give you an Uber to a homeless shelter and you can wait there. And the veteran said, hey, wait a minute, but I have this community care provider was helping him and said, hey, under contract, you have a community care provider that is right in town and has a bed available today. And they said, sorry, our policy is we're not going to allow them community care. So we'd rather you go to a homeless shelter and wait and maybe die than go ahead and get a contracted provider who's really good, has a bed right now. These are the ludicrous things that the VA has been doing, that the Trump administration is in the process of fixing, and why we need to help them with the Veterans Access Act to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Darren, it sounds like that's meant to humiliate and demoralize veterans. I mean, that is just absolutely insane.
Yeah,
Is
it
that
is. And look, there's a lot of good VA employees who are just sickened by this, and that's why they have a recruiting and retention problem because so many quit. But yeah, the management thinks that they know better than veterans what veterans healthcare should be. That hey, we're a monopoly. If you want your care, you do what we say, or you just don't get care.
I'd like to know how many of those bureaucrats would like to go stay in a homeless shelter themselves whenever they're facing a
Right,
medical
right.
situation. My goodness. Has Doug Collins, the Secretary for Veterans Affairs, done anything to improve things? What's been happening on his watch?
Well, he's a big supporter of the Veterans Access Act. And one of the challenges is that there are zero political appointees over the veterans' health care. And that's one of the things that they're working with Congress and changing is adding a lot of more political appointees to do oversight. But there's only one political appointee, and that is
Meaning, meaning in the entirety of the VA, Doug Collins is the only political
no,
appointee?
no, there's only one political appointee for the Veterans Health Administration, which
Okay.
has
One department. Okay.
400,000 employees
Wow.
and 6.4 million veterans who use it on average, and is the biggest integrated healthcare system in the country. And the only political employee is the Undersecretary of Health, and he hasn't been confirmed yet.
My
So,
gosh.
and I will tell you from experience, although there's a lot of good employees there, management is the problem. And management has told me in the past when I've worked in there, I worked in there under Bush as well. They have a theory and they have an attitude, which is we'll tell people like Doug Collins what they want to hear, and then we'll do what we want to do
Yeah.
because there's no oversight.
Why can't Darren, can Doug Collins fire them?
Well, he certainly he can if he can track down who's doing what. But Doug Collins is a kind of a busy guy with a lot of other issues. And
Yeah.
so it has to be brought to his attention, which is why we need the political appointees to be actually get into VHA and start taking that thing over, and why we need work with Congress to get a lot more political appointees position. Because look, employees are in some ways bipartisan that they hate everybody. They think they own VA healthcare, and everyone just needs to do what they can do, or they will outlast you. The Mission Act was a huge something that just really hurt their ability to do that, and they hated it, and they would try to sabotage it all the time. But having been in VA before, I knew all their tricks, and I would personally stop this sort of thing. And I personally came back from the White House to VA and implemented it for Secretary Wilkie. And so once again, I'm off the books, kind of advising on the side to my friends in there. Good guys. It's always tough when you're new to the VA, and it's tough when you don't have a team of political appointees. When I was at DOD, we had a whole big team. VA only has about 39, 40 political appointees for the second largest federal agency. DOD has over 300. So that's still a thin layer, but you can spread out and you can validate. And that's what they're in process of right now. So Doug Collins has issued some directives about, yes, you will provide the community care and those sorts of things, but it's hard to validate that it's happening. And we're getting reports from especially mental health providers that rogue administrators on their own are denying community care.
Darren, and this is something that Chris and I were discussing before the show. I worked at the Department of Labor under Bush, and I can tell you the entrenched bureaucrats are not. This is the discussion Chris and I were having, that he was saying they're ineptitude. And I was saying, no, it's not just ineptitude. It is actually willful subversion of any progress. Any movement off the status quo will be met with defiance. That was my experience at the Department of Labor.
Yeah, and that's what happens at VA, and it's the management layer, and they want to control everything. And matter of fact, the Biden people did a thing called the Red Team Report, and they said in the Red Team Report that was done by the careers with the cover of a couple ex Undersecretary of Health, that community care was a threat. It was a threat to the facilities, and my answer to that is then do a good job.
I couldn't agree with you. That's 100% right. Yeah, do a good job.
Right.
You talked about the management layer, Darren. Are these managers or administrators in different VA regions throughout the country? Is that what that is?
Yeah, it's the healthcare system. So it can be everything from the senior executive service, the medical center directors, the supervisors at the hospital, the chief medical officers. It's usually not any of the clinicians. It's usually not the nurses, because clinicians and nurses want their patients to be successful, and they don't want patients waiting 3, 4, 5, 6 months. As a matter of fact, a lot of my information I get for what's happening comes from doctors and nurses who track me down and say, we appreciate what you did in the Mission Act. It actually gave us the ability to make sure veterans got care in a timely manner. And then we've been ordered not to do it. And I've seen them punished. I've seen them sent to other medical centers as punishment. I've seen them disciplined. I've seen them quit out of disgust. And so the problem is with management, in their socialized healthcare, patients are a secondary thing. Their own personal pet projects, research, or whatever becomes the number one priority. It is so bad that VA is down to about 6 patients a day for a clinician to see. And in some areas, 3 or 4 patients a day. And so they always complain about not having staff. It's not they don't have enough staff. They don't have productivity, because when doctors and nurses say, hey, we would like to get back up to like 15 or 16 and see more patients, get our wait times down, they're saying, no. Don't ever say that again. We run this ship. So it's whether you're a veteran or whether you're staff, it is a very autocratic, dictatorial, socialized healthcare system. It runs on control and not having information for the veterans to run it, which is why for veterans, VA has a thing called the reliance number. The reliance number is how much does a veteran patient use VA for their healthcare versus how much do they use their other health insurance.
Yeah.
And 84% of veterans have other health insurance. Well, the number is, and most people might be surprised about this, the average veteran only gets about 38% of their care from the VA and 62% from their other health insurance. VA is free to the veteran for the most part, a few co-pays here and there, no premiums. And their other health insurance, as you and your listeners know, it's very expensive if you get private health care.
Yeah, so if you have private health care. Darin, names. I'm sure Mr. Collins and other top-level VA officials know the names of these administrators, or at least some of these managers, who are causing and perpetuating the problems that you're talking about. Would that be a fair statement? Have any of them been fired?
No.
Why not?
Well, one of the problems is that they stopped following the president's accountability legislation. And so the previous administration made deals with the unions that it is very hard to fire employees again. Unlike with the accountability legislation, you had a due process that was very quick and you could fire them, and we actually posted it on the website. So that is another problem. They have to go through the process. And so, vision directors, medical center directors, they are shorthanded. They just got on their legal counsel. They're just adding employees. It's been a tough fight. As you know, the Democrats have been blocking until recently, until the override in the Senate. They've been blocking almost all political employees. And so the political appointees, there's only 39 of them to run the entire VA, which has over 450,000 employees. The majority are there. So they're in the process of identifying, and I talked to them off the side, and they're saying, hey, we are trying to get down to the truth, because if you fire someone, you have to actually have some evidence of what to fire them. They're very good at hiding the evidence. But do we know who they are generally? Yeah, we know.
You've done a very good job of articulating the evidence. I mean, you wouldn't be on here talking about these horrendous issues if there wasn't data to support it.
There's data. They have found the old documents, and I'm with you. I think that they should identify and make some examples of a few of these careers. And look, one of the things that you can do is, it's kind of like the military. You can fire without actually kicking them out of the thing. So if you're a senior executive service, you're a medical center director, a vision director, or you're the acting undersecretary of health, and the secretary can literally relieve you of command and send you anywhere in the country. And I'm a big believer, if it's very hard, which it is, to do the actual firing of kicking him out, then, hey, if you're at DC and we have a document with you saying deny community care, then let's send you to Puerto Rico and start the administrative process while you're there.
Do you know whether there have been any such sort of administrative removals because of this?
I'm not aware of any at this point.
Yeah. Because the reason why I'm asking you about this, Darren, and I know that you're not in the Trump administration at this point, is that whether you're in a government bureaucracy or even a private organization, when people do not feel that there's ever any real accountability for
Right.
what they do, then the natural tendency is toward inertia, inaction, incompetence, indifference, and that's exactly where we are.
Right. You're
You
right.
know, I lament the fact that there seems to be so little focus on something that in our view should be an absolute top priority, not just for the Veterans Administration, but for the Trump administration as a whole.
Right.
You know, these heroes, when you live in a country where illegal immigrants are being treated better than our war heroes, that's a massive problem. And I know that you said that, the Mr. Collins is busy. He's got a lot of things going on. I don't think he should ever be too busy for this issue. This should be the main focus of his entire tenure, in our view.
No, I agree. And, I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not sure what they're investigating. But what I can tell you is this. I would encourage my friends at VA to follow the DOD, now the DOW example of when I was there and what has happened since, of identifying poor performing generals, which is the SESers at VA, and getting rid of them. I mean, we had a process. I mean, some people are like, how come these generals are leaving or how come these generals are retiring? Well, it wasn't willy-nilly. There wasn't a secret hit list at DOD, and then we just ideologically came in there. We came in there, we evaluated what they were doing, and guess what? When they were doing a bad job of running the military healthcare system, suddenly they had to retire really quickly. And
you could also promote the Bobby and Pete challenge and cause all the VA administrators to have to do 50 pull-ups and how many push-ups? 100 push-ups in under 5 minutes or under 10 minutes. See how that goes. I'm sure those
they might have a heart attack.
Fat bureaucrats are not up to the challenge, so maybe they would self-deselect.
They might. They
Right.
might. Or they might have much more emergency room situations going on.
Well,
Yes.
that's true.
But it's just the frustrating part is if you understand how the bureaucracy works and you understand the authorities, then there are things that you can do. That is how I was successful in implementing the Mission Act when they said, oh, it can't be done, blah, blah, blah. I said, well, it can be done. You have no choice but to get it done. And so, and I did the same thing at DOD, which is don't tell me how it can't be done. Here's your outcome you have to have. Now you will go back and tell me what you need to get it done, not how you can't get it.
Well said. Well said.
And that's how we got the Mission Act done. And when I came back, had been failing for 3 months. We got it done in 9 months. They said, you can't do it. I said, you will do it. So I was loved by a lot of VA employees and I was hated by a lot of management who had a common reframe of Darren's always making me do this. And management would say, well, did he tell you the wrong thing to do? No, he was always right. But we just didn't like Darren telling us what to do. Were you getting it done? No, we were not getting it done. Well, then too bad. You got to get it done.
There you go.
And so, we need more of that at the VA right now. We need the Veterans Access Act so that as our friends in VA get confirmed, get their hands around this and start dealing with poor performing employees and what they're doing. The challenge is, even with the law, future administration could undo it, but it makes it much harder. And the employees are more fearful of going against something that is not just a regulation, but strongly, specifically codified in the law, which is what the Veterans
Act is, right? Which the Mission Act is, correct?
Mission Act was, but one of the things it did is it had a lot of regulations to implement it, and then they wouldn't follow the regulations that the law required.
So they're just not following the law. Is
right.
What it comes down to. Yeah,
that's my point. But also by spelling it out and not giving any wiggle room, once again, it reinforces and makes it harder to do that. And there are other things we need to do. We need to reestablish accountability, the ability to quickly fire poor performing employees.
I think that's got to be a top priority. You mentioned a little while ago, Darren, that the VA is contract healthcare providers or doctors around the country. What is the point of contracting with third-party providers that war heroes, veterans may choose to go see? What's the point of contracting with them if they have to go through a bureaucratic process in the VA in order to be approved to go see the contracting doctor? Why is that there?
Well, it defeats the purpose when, there is normal managed healthcare process procedures to make sure that the patient is getting the proper care and getting the proper needed service. It's when you mismanage that process. So I have a process at Camp Pendleton that works great. I go to Camp Pendleton, and if you want to understand what the Mission Act did and what we're trying to fix with the Veterans Access Act, just look at DOD healthcare. That's what my model was. And at Camp Pendleton, if you do it right, let me give you an example. When I need dermatology, I always need it in the community because Camp Pendleton just doesn't have facilities. I go to my doctor. He simply puts it in the system in a day. I have it online. No problem. No bureaucrat trying to stop it. You need it. They've got algorithms. You get it. You go and do it. Good to go. At the VA, they don't let you have the technology. They don't let you know what's going on. They try to stop it. They've had secret referral coordination team panels to stop you. They spend more staff trying to stop you from getting care. So it is a self-defeating purpose. Why have this great network? And then at the same time, you got a bureaucracy that's always trying to sabotage that network, whether it is stopping veterans from getting their care or trying to make them claw them back when they haven't finished their care, or going ahead and not paying their claims on time, and those sorts of things. And it makes it very hard. I gotta tell you, there's a lot of mental health providers and others that I know that have done scholarships to the veterans and don't get paid because they can't stand to see what happens to the veterans and aren't going to let them be at a homeless shelter.
Darren, I want to go back for a second to what happened under the Biden administration, where these bureaucrats were not following the law. Maybe were new regulations put in place under the Biden administration, or reframing of the regulations put in place? Because I'm wondering if that's the case, if they can be sued using the Chevron doctrine, Chris, saying that these agencies don't actually have the right to determine their own regulations, that the Congress has to spell it out specifically what it is they're meant to be doing.
Right. Some of it is in paper. Like, for example, they created a new policy that went against the Mission Act and declared that the mental health access standards they didn't have to follow. That was put in a directive in policy. Most of the time, they're much sneakier than that. They just go ahead and write private memos, directives. There's a document that the regional managers, division directors were sent from headquarters that basically said, as your performance report, if you want to get a good performance report and therefore a bonus, one of the goals in there was you had to reduce community care. And so there were several things on reducing community care. But yeah, they send the message, they send memos, they do policy directives. They actually had, I just found this out recently, they actually had a new draft regulation that they had sent to OMB in the Biden administration. Thank God President Trump won, because if he hadn't, this would have gone through OMB and would be out there today. That was going to basically undo the access standards, undo choice. So they were ready to pull the trigger. They were just waiting for the election to get over. And they wrote
so you have a situation here. Let me just say this. So you have a situation, what you're describing here, Darren. You have a Veterans Affair whose regional administrators are either incompetent or willfully, deliberately blocking access to real care. You have these community facilities that are set up that would provide the care with which the VA is contracted. And you're saying that the supervisors within the Veteran Affairs administrations are sending memos to their subordinates telling them that your promotion or your meritorious commendation, or whatever words you want to use, is dependent upon your reducing access to these community care facilities by the veterans? So you're getting promoted for blocking their access to care.
Right. So you send it to the division directors and you say, this is what you need to do if you're going to get bonuses, good performance reports. And then, of course, once it's sent to the visiting directors, they control the medical center directors, and it rolls all downhill.
We need a call for whistleblowers.
Well, that's how I got, it was an employee who sent me the memo that went to the visiting directors. Working with another organization a number of years ago, Concerned Veterans for America, FOIA request where I got all these documents that if you're going to tell people to do things the wrong way, you got to train them to do it the wrong way. So I got the training documents that showed how they were not doing accurate wait times so they could deny eligibility requirements. They were literally training staff that do not tell veterans that they are eligible for community care unless they ask. And on and on and on. They had flow charts of, hey, if a veteran's already eligible for care and they want the care, you're going to go ahead and review that, and you're going to decide whether or not you think it's appropriate for them to get that care, even though it's already been deemed appropriate, it's already been deemed medically, clinically necessary, and the veteran already wants it, they're already out. So you can overturn the law with your own secret panel. Sort of thing.
And yet, even in that situation, with that type of absolutely egregious, really quasi-criminal conduct, that's not grounds for immediate termination.
I think it should be. I agree.
Though you would certainly think that you certainly.
Yeah, you got to get boots on the ground, so to speak. The careers aren't going to do this to themselves.
Sure. What do you think the reason is, Darren? Why do you think it is that there's this prevailing institutional attitude in the VA? I mean, presumably these are American citizens. Presumably they're fundamentally decent people, and they're dealing with some of the most heroic individuals that they'll ever meet in their lives. They're dealing who have been traumatized and scarred in their lives in ways that these bureaucrats could never even imagine. Why do you think that there is not more sympathy, more sensitivity to these soldiers? I don't understand it.
Well, most of them are not veterans themselves, management level. So it's true that close to 30% of all employees are veterans, but that's not the case for the management level. And so there are a small minority of management. I mean, I have a good friend who's a retired Army colonel who is a medical center director, and that medical center director, he runs that particular hospital and follows the Mission Act. But he is the vast minority. The vast majority are people that start off at low-level employees and through favors and friendships and whatever, got themselves continually promoted until they became the medical center directors and whatnot. So you have a monopoly and you have no accountability. Now think about any monopoly with no accountability. You would see the same thing. And so they want to protect what they have in money and power and employees and control. And so they hire people that are like that. And
but that just, yeah. And I can understand them wanting to protect their monopoly and protect their control. I understand that. And I understand how that could breed a certain level of inefficiency and incompetence when you don't have any competition. But right. What I'm asking about right now is this willful hostility toward veterans, toward military veterans. I don't understand where that comes from.
Yeah, it's kind of a downward cycle culture that has developed in the last 20 years that reinforces itself of a particular mindset. It is really, really disturbing. And a lot of it is because they just see a veteran as a number, not as a person. They don't know these people. Most all of them are not veterans themselves. They don't get their health care at the VA. They have FEHB. And so they relate to it. They can't relate to the veterans. They can't. Now, that's not all management and whatnot, but the people that control that do these things, it is mystifying in some ways. You have to sit there just as a human being. How could you sit there, for example, and say, I'm going to send a homeless veteran to a shelter who needs residential mental health now. Do you not have any compassion for that person when they could get treatment right now?
Exactly right, Darren. That's exactly my point. And I just don't understand it. I don't understand it. And I agree with you completely that there has to be a mechanism of swift accountability. That has to be there, because if there's not, It's not going to change. We had someone on our show, Danielle and I were talking about pre-show, Jeremy Harrell. He started, he's a veteran and a combat veteran, and he had a lot of his brothers committing suicide and
Right.
just suffering greatly, and they were getting no response and no real relief from the Veterans Administration. So he started his own nonprofit that became very successful, and he saved a lot of lives. And the VA did all that it could do to destroy him, to destroy his nonprofit. And he ended up getting criminally prosecuted for nothing because of it. So I think it's just deplorable. Not only will they not do their job, not only is the VA hostile to some of the greatest heroes in the world, they won't even let other American citizens take the initiative to provide relief for these soldiers.
Right. No, it is mystifying in one way, but on the other hand, if you look at socialism and the practices of people who practice socialism, it's the reoccurring pattern, whether it's people who try to do socialism in this country. I mean, look, I live in California. When we had COVID, we had Governor Newsom take away our rights, mandatory masks. And if you didn't wear a mask, they would arrest you. I mean, I just could not believe. I said, can this be a free country? So if you give people with that mindset the ability to have power, they abuse power and they go after it. That's why Venezuela is as bad once the socialists took over. And that's why
is the VA, Darren, is the VA, in your view, in terms of its practical service, in terms of its operational structure, is it a socialist system?
It was, and it under Biden went back to being socialized healthcare. Yes. So, and I make this example. I say, look, if you are in the VA system, this is what they try to do to you. You have no control over who your doctor is. You have no control over your hospital. You have no control over your specialist. You either do what they tell you to do, you wait and go where they want to. And if you complain, they have a process to ostracize you and kick you out of the medical center. I've had veterans who have complained loudly to management, and they were given a letter saying that you will go to counseling, which I call re-education camp, or you will not be allowed in the medical center. Or I've had veterans who have been told that, hey, you said a cuss word because when you were being mistreated, and you can only go to the medical center if you are VA police escort you, sort of things. Yeah, they at the extremes, they have very totalitarian dictatorship ways that goes. And one of the things that I've drafted up, I really haven't shared much. I think I need to share this with Market Veteran Action and start pushing, was with a friend of mine created a Veterans Bill of Rights. I think we need to have a Veterans Bill of Rights so veterans know their rights and are accountable. And one of the other things we're talking about, which is not part of the Veterans Access Act, is, hey, if people don't follow the law and there are, veterans die or negative health consequences and stuff like that, shouldn't there be criminal liability?
There absolutely should be.
Because that's one of the accountability issues that isn't there. They can do whatever they want, and they can deny you care, and a veteran could commit suicide because they couldn't get the care, or they could wait 5 months to get their cancer treatment and then be told, too late. You waited
too
5
late.
months.
Yeah.
And this also has happened a good number of times where veterans were diagnosed with cancer, didn't get treatment for 8 months because VA kept canceling and rescheduling, and then they were told too late.
Yeah, they should absolutely.
They can foreclose, and then they can foreclose even, so they can treat you like garbage, and then even foreclose your opportunity to seek meaningful redress for the way that you've been treated. So they don't even have to be bothered with a complaint.
Right. And about the only thing you can do right now under existing law is medical malpractice, which is tough and which most lawyers won't take because there's 1,000 VA lawyers, and lawyers are like, hey, what's the chance that we're going to win when they have this big body of lawyers?
They can pay 1,000 VA lawyers,
right,
hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. They can't defend their incompetence, but they can't treat our veterans any better than this.
Right. That is a sad state of affair that this administration is in the process of fixing again.
Darin, when we spoke yesterday, two things come to mind when we're talking about accountability and culpability. One of them is if you think about how there's a whole system in place for educators, for different members of society. If they see a child being abused or harmed or neglected in any way, they're called mandatory reporters. You have a responsibility, and if you neglect that responsibility, you can be held criminally liable. Similarly, one example we talked about yesterday, if you're flying a plane and people are killed, you're responsible for that. But if you're the air traffic controller, which in my mind is these administrators, they are also criminally liable for causing problems or for crashing planes. These people are destroying people's lives, and they need to be held liable. One thing first, maybe would you tell us a little bit, just outline for us what you're trying to achieve with this veterans bill that you are hoping to see passed before Veterans Day?
Right. So it's called the Veterans Access Act. Is Chairman Boston, the House Veterans Affairs Committee, is the sponsor of it there. Senator Moran, chairman of the Senate Veterans Affairs Committee, is the sponsor. My side name for it is the Fix Mission Act bill because I helped provide technical assistance on creation of that and went with staff on what's everything that Biden's broken, how do we fix it? So, for example, in the Mission Act, it said, hey, create the access standards. We'd never had any, so it was put in a regulation. They've been proven out over the last 6 years as being very good. Even the Biden administration couldn't find fault with those access standards in reviewing them. So we want those codified in the law so that they can't do what the Biden administration was going to try to do, which was do a new regulation to go ahead and basically make it so you don't really have any access standards anymore. The bureaucrats would have legally all control. So we want to codify, we want to put in law those access standards so that they're permanent and no future Biden administration can tamper with them. We want to also make it crystal clear and exactly to the point so there's no dancing around it anymore. And if a veteran is eligible for community care, you will tell them. You will tell them, and you will tell them within 72 hours that they're eligible so they can make the decision. If you deny a veteran community care, you will tell them, because right now they don't tell them. And there's an appeal process the Mission Act provided. So you will tell them, and you will tell them how they can appeal so that, and once again, within like 72 hours, so that if they've been denied and they feel, hey, I should be able to get community care and I've been denied, they can follow the appeal process and they can get an answer in 72 hours. VA doesn't have, like DOD or most healthcare systems, you cannot track, you don't get an EOB, an estimation of benefits. So you don't actually know how much you owe if you see a community care provider, if you owe a co-payment or not. You should be able to go online and get that. You should be able to go online and track your authorization. So if you're eligible, where's my authorization? You should be able to track that and be able to do like I can do in Camp Pendleton. I can pick any provider I want. I can change it online. I don't even have to call anybody. So we should have these self-service functions as well.
A veteran is eligible if a veteran is enrolled in Veterans Affairs. He's enrolled in the Veterans Affairs Administration. Why should he have to seek approval from the Veterans Administration to go get this contracted care at their expense? Why shouldn't he be able to go see the contracted doctor, and perhaps the doctor does a report, here's his condition, here's the issue, it's military related, send it to the VA and let the VA take care of it. I don't understand why a veteran should have to go through this bureaucratic process and fight against an agency that you have so eloquently stated does not have his best interest at heart, does everything that it can do to delay and abort the care that he needs. Yet this is the very agency that he has to go through to get approved for the care that he desperately needs, that often may be the difference between whether he's alive tomorrow or whether he decides to take his life. Why is that? Why does he have to go through that bureaucratic step?
Well, for emergency care and for urgent care, he doesn't. And we need new legislation to provide what we call, and Veteran Action is for and after the Veterans Access Act. We're going to be working with Senator Blackburn on her bill, which is the Veterans Healthcare Freedom Act, which at all times the veteran should be able to pick between the facilities and community care. just like every other American pretty much can. They can pick. And there's always guardrails in terms of network and stuff like that. But yes, the veterans should be able to do that. It was the plan in Trump 1 to fix up the VA healthcare system with the Mission Act, establish the initial choice rights, and then the next step in Trump 2 was going to be that. Unfortunately, we had a delay in Trump 2. And so once again, we're trying to use the Veterans Access Act this year to fix things up so that we can stabilize what's going on. Veterans can start getting their care timely. And then the next step is to work with Senator Blackburn and get passage of her Veterans Healthcare Freedom Act, which will provide exactly that. Because you're right. And when I tell people is like this: number one, if I'm at DOD and I don't like Camp Pendleton, I can go TRICARE Select and go to do a PPO. Why can't a veteran do that? Right? So you have full choice and full freedom in the DOD healthcare system, DOW now, but you don't have those freedoms once you leave Department of War and go to the VA. But you should. If you're a federal employee, you have those freedoms. You can pick any variety of plans in FEHB. If you're a Medicare, you have that freedom. If you're a Medicaid, you have that freedom. It's just the veterans who use the VA. And so the Democrats fight tooth and nail and privatization and trying to make every nonsense claim because they want socialized healthcare. They want to expand socialized health to the rest of the country to try to prove it with VA. But you're right. That is the next step. First step, pass this legislation. Next step in 2026. Help Senator Blackburn pass the Veterans Healthcare Freedom Act and provide full choice. Because ultimately, if the dollar follows the veteran and they can go ahead at all times pick the community over the VA, then the VA facilities will have one or two choices. Either become a really good provider that they want to pick you, and they do pick you, or die. Just like the private sector, right? If you don't provide a good service and your customers stop coming to you, you go out of business.
Yeah.
If the VA facility is not going to provide a customer, the dollar should follow the veteran, and they say, well, then what if they go out of business? Well, that would be the veteran's choice if they go out of business. And so if you want to incentivize them to do a good job, the only way to incentivize them is break up the monopoly. Yeah. Break up the monopoly.
And Darren, one thing that I'm struck by as we talk about this is that the VA is extremely overcrowded. It's extremely, at least right now, in gridlock, unable to take care of the veterans that it needs to serve, right. Which points to why do we have so many sick, hurting, really mentally destroyed veterans who need such help? Is there any push within this administration, within the Department of Defense, to create healthier warriors, not just physically healthier warriors, mentally healthier warriors? Because if the soldiers come out of service in a healthier place, they're able to live a more meaningful, more fulfilling life, and it's going to take pressure off of the system. So to me, it starts while they're still in service.
Right. And under President Trump, in fact, I did one of the executive orders to start that process on the mental health, so that a veteran, especially the first year when they leave the service, is the most likely that they'll commit suicide. They have a double suicide rate that first year. And because there's a big adjustment, whether you've been a combat vet or not, there's a big adjustment when you've been in the military and the civilian world. But you're right, more of that needs to happen. The challenge, once again, is that traditionally VA and DOD on the surface cooperate, but don't really cooperate. And when you're in the Department of War, we care about you until you're in the process of transitioning out, and then you're somebody else's problem, and you're the VA's problem. Yeah, but we need to do that. We need reform on the military healthcare system. I wrote an op-ed when I was over in Department of War on that, and so it has a better system, but it has a lot of problems. Once again, inherited from the Biden administration, where they basically wouldn't let you ask for more than 80% of your need. They have a problem when you're deployed getting contracted docs to see. And yes, they need, and I wrote a New York Times op-ed with Dan Caldwell about readiness and talked about that issue. If you want to have effective warfighters, you got to have, in readiness, you've got to have them mentally and physically, them and their families, good to go at all times. And you need to spend the money to make sure to do it. VA is overstaffed and overfunded. The military healthcare system is understaffed and underfunded. Go figure. And yes, we want money for war fighting, but it's not an either or. preparation. Because if you don't have the war fighters, you don't have the war fighting.
Darin, does Doug Collins, two-part question here. Does Doug Collins understand the gravity of the situation here? Because what you've described to us today is absolutely reprehensible. Reprehensible that a government agency would treat the very people that it should be treating with absolute and total respect and responsiveness, would be treating them this way. Does he understand the problem, and does he have the ability and the will to do what's necessary to change this?
Right. To be honest, I haven't talked with Secretary Collins, so I don't know personally how well he knows this issue and the gravity. At some level, I know he does. I've seen this with political appointees in Trump 1. It's so broken. It's hard to grasp. Let me give you an example. In Trump 1, I was the only political appointee who had served in the VA in the Bush administration. And I told everyone about how broke it was, what the careers would do, and all the stuff we're talking about. And at the time, they just looked at me and shook their head, and they just couldn't believe anything could be that bad. 3 months later, they said, Darin, I didn't really believe you when you told me how bad it was, because it was just unbelievable. But now that I've been here 3 months, it's even worse than you said. So, the secretary has a tendency, any secretary has a tendency, and I've served 5 of them, has a tendency to be kind of insulated. So I know he's still wrapping his head around the stuff. I know he's been hearing about this stuff. But it's hard to fix VHA when you have no troops in VHA. And the best you can do is have a weekly meeting with these guys, and they will tell you a bunch of BS and lie to your face about what's going on and following their orders. I had that experience, knew what to do about it. I did it in Department of War, which is literally put together teams and send them to the field and validate that everything you told them to do, that they're doing. And then if they don't, then you have consequences. But you got to have the troops. So they need to better organize the limited troops they have and send them to the field. And they need to start either directly firing, or if they can't firing, relieve them of command, relieve them of their jobs, put them in the basement, put them in the library, put them in Puerto Rico.
And we'll still, of course, the taxpayers, that sounds like a good compromise. The taxpayers will still be able to pay for you despite your absolute total uselessness. We'll still subsidize your income, but at least you're not going to be in a position to where you can directly impede
Right.
veterans' access to good health care.
Right. And if you do these things, they see the writing on the wall. The bad employees who will a lot of these will retire. So you can put the screws on them and get them to retire. And look, they do that to the good employees. When the good employees speak up, they put the screws to them. And I know whistleblowers like Paula Badin, who do the whistleblowing on the Arizona Phoenix, and they sent her for whistleblowing to the basement and try to force her out. And she was a Navy veteran herself, which is one of the reasons she was so passionate about calling on it and surviving. But let me tell you, it's tough for a lot of employees. They need paycheck to paycheck, and the intense mental cultural pressure on these guys is intense.
Danielle y'all may have discussed this earlier, but let me ask you this: are there any statutory whistleblower protections in place for people inside the Veterans Administration who can report some of this egregious behavior?
There are some. There were a lot of improvements to those in the Accountability Act of Whistleblower and Accountability Act of 2017 that the Biden administration just declared that they were going to follow. How much Secretary Collins and his team have been successful in taking over the Whistleblower Protection Office and reinstituting that. But once again, it becomes a manpower issue when you have whistleblowers and you have so few employees to go ahead and do the investigations and coordinate with authority. Are there protections? Yes. Are there some good employees that have used those protections, and other careers have found that, hey, don't mess with them because they're not afraid and they have followed the process, and if you can't go after them? Yes, where I get some of my information in Louisiana, for example, from a Army veteran social worker whistleblower who has testified, and they're like, they know they can't do anything to him, so they leave him alone, and yeah, he constantly is in their face. But yeah, what we need to do is we need to set the example. If you set the example and you fire, and transfer, and use the authorities that you have, then you will stop a lot of this bad behavior. People will retire. I've been a big believer, and I helped provide the technical assistance with Congress on the original accountability. I worked in the VA in 2017 and worked on that to get that passed for President Trump. And it worked at first when people were accountable and you had it on the website, the numbers and who was being fired. And so people, they got back in their lane. Biden people took over and they said, hey, do what you want now.
Well, Darin, I'm so thankful, and Danielle may have a follow-up here, but I'm very, very thankful personally for the work that you're doing to try to improve this process. It's truly a horrendous mess, and it is heartbreaking that the casualties of that bureaucratic morass would be our soldiers, would be many of the men who, but for their sacrifice, we wouldn't be even living in a free country. I think it's absolutely heartbreaking, and it's something that just demands redress and demands justice. And I know you're only one person, but we're very thankful for what you are doing.
Yeah.
Thank you. And to your point, it is heartbreaking. People say, why do you continue? It's so frustrating, it's so difficult. I said, man, I get these calls from veterans and I help as many as I can, but I can't stand to see my fellow veterans suffer and not get care, whether it's cancer treatment, mental health, medical devices. They should be the first in line, not the last in line. They should get the best care, not the worst care. And they should have the choice and be able to choose their direction of what they want that works best for them.
Yeah. Amen. And Darin, does Veteran Action have a call to action on this, that people can go and let their legislators know that this bill needs to get passed as a first step to reform?
Absolutely. You can go to the Veteran Action X site. You can go to the website. Mark Lucas, the founder and head of Veteran Action, and my friend, is working this very hard, continually putting postings on videos of providers' experiences and veterans' experiences. And, he is working hard. Veteran Action is working hard. We have met with the White House on this. We have met with the committee staff and whatnot. And we are pushing hard, and he's developing media and videos that highlight this, because most people just don't know. And so that's where the videos are important in spreading the word. So people should go to the Veteran Action social media site and check it out and pass the word and contact their legislators, whether they're Republican or Democrat, and say, let's start the fix-it process by passing the Veterans Access Act. No more politics, no more ideology. Let's just take care of our veterans. And then after we get that done, we'll work on the full choice with Senator Blackburn's bill and go forward with that.
Is there any resistance, Darin, that you're aware of? Let's just say among Republicans in the Congress and in the Senate to this. Why would there be resistance to this?
There is no resistance among Republicans. The resistance is, sadly to say, it's there's a few co-sponsors on the Democrat side, mostly in red states, like in Mississippi. But most of it, and I experienced this in the Mission Act, is just ideological. It's like, if Republicans are in favor, we don't even have to know what it is. We're just opposed. If Trump's in favor, then we don't want Trump to have a win. Nancy Pelosi was against
What a
the Mission
disgrace.
Act. Nancy Pelosi told us to Chairman Rowe at the time, I'm not opposed to the Mission Act because I'm actually against the Mission Act. I just don't want Trump to have a win. And
what a sick woman.
Sad state of affairs when people are just ideological. Veterans, of all things, used to be a bipartisan issue. And for the most part, it's not, because the veterans have just gone off the edge and they just oppose it just to oppose it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for shining the light, sir. And thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Keep up your hard work.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and appreciate your audience for tuning in and spreading the word.
God bless you,
absolutely, Darin. And we'll be amplifying this message on our X page, and we'll be sent so people will know where the Veteran Action X page is. Awesome. Yeah. God bless. We'll talk to you soon. Thank you. Chris, what a disgusting, absolutely insane problem that we're facing with the VA. I mean, as I think back, and I know we talked about this, I reflect on my time as an intern and a young employee at the Department of Labor during the Bush administration. It's just astounding to me that bureaucrats would do that in a way that impacts people's lives. I mean, we're not talking about pushing paper here. These are people's lives that they're holding in their hands. And it's just astonishing. that people would be so not just careless, but like we talked about, I mean, absolutely defiant because they don't want to do their job.
My emotions right now, Danielle, are a perfect mix between sadness and heartbreak and visceral and extreme anger
Yeah.
about this. This is the reason why people hate the government.
Yeah.
This is a textbook example of why the government does nothing well, why people don't trust the government, why people hate the government. We're talking about an agency here. I don't even know what the annual budget of the VA is, but I'm sure it's staggering, I'm sure. And it's all going to pay these bureaucrats and these administrators in the VA who are not only failing to respond to the urgent needs of our war heroes and our military veterans, they are actively sabotaging their ability to get well. And they're even being, I almost fell off of my chair when Darin said that supervisors within the VA reward their subordinates for reducing and denying veterans' requests to get contract care from other doctors so they can keep them in this house of horrors, which is exactly what it is. It's a house of horrors. And, I resisted the urge to get angry on the show today when Darin said, and I know he didn't mean anything by this, when he said that, Doug Collins has a lot of other issues he's dealing with. I don't think there's no more important issue for Doug Collins to be dealing with than this issue. There are military veterans in the United States today, right now, who are probably about to kill themselves because they're being demoralized and crushed into the ground by the Veterans Administration in the United States of America. And they'll be dead tomorrow because of it. There is no higher priority for Doug Collins than to make sure. And it stuns me that with all the data that Darin presented to us today about what's going on inside the VA, that Doug Collins doesn't have the absolute authority to fire these people, to fire them directly.
And you think, Chris, when you think about a Republican form of government, you think about the austerity that our government structure was created to be, the agencies that are actually meant to exist, right? Department of Education, get rid of it. No one cares. There's tons of agencies. The IRS, please get rid of it. No one wants it anyway. There are agency after agency after agency that needs to be shrunk down or destroyed completely. The Veterans Affairs Agency is a mandate, is a responsibility of our government, of the people, to those who fought and served to defend and protect her. So I don't understand why this agency that has been, extremely well funded and extraordinarily poorly managed, it is in a position that, I know why it's in the position it's in, because this is the direction of government, right? This is just the direction of bloating, bureaucracy, lack of accountability. And this is what happens when your mandate is completely rudderless. It's time for someone to come in with a strong mandate. It's time for someone to come in and start firing people.
I could not agree with you more. I was a little concerned, and that's so well said, Danielle. I was concerned when I asked Darin directly, does Doug Collins know what is going on, the severity of this problem? And does he have the will and the backbone to do something about it, to make meaningful changes? And, he said he didn't know. He hopes so, but he doesn't know for sure. Does it not stun you that the head of the Veterans Administration does not know and does not have the data in front of him to be able to see how absolutely incompetent and hostile his agency is and how the effect that it's having on our veterans? Why would he not know this?
Well, because it's almost impossible to know as an outsider coming in. This is one thing you and I talked about off air. He's coming into a hostile agency. He is he is the one person, one of the very few people that's been put in a position to clean this place up. Well, whenever you are the one person coming into this hostile agency, and they are, I mean, they're basically like some kind of bacteria trying to hide their malfeasance, trying to hold on to the status quo in a very parasitic manner. They're going out of their way to the bureaucrats in our government agencies, by and large, go out of their way to completely defend and protect the status quo, defend and protect their comfort, defend and protect their processes and their ideology. They're not operating in a way that it makes it very clean cut for any outsider coming in to understand what's going on. I mean, Darin even mentioned that whenever he got in there, they would lie to his face. So you have to have, I agree with him, you have to have people who are willing to dig in and do the due diligence, and then they have to have the authority to terminate people.
Well, Danielle, I can appreciate what you're saying, but I don't accept that. Yeah, I don't believe that Doug Collins inherited a more corrupt, bureaucratic, bloated agency than Robert F. Kennedy Jr. inherited with Department of Health and Human Services. I don't believe that he inherited a more corrupt, politically correct, or more of a cesspool than Pete Hegseth inherited with the Department of Defense. I don't believe that that's an excuse. That's not an excuse. And if you know what's going on, including the fact that maybe these things aren't being reported, he needs to be terminating or putting on administrative leave these regional administrators all over the country. The bottom line is they are not treating this issue with the urgency that it needs to be treated with. If Doug Collins' son had suffered war injury or was scarred by and traumatized by war, and he were on the verge of committing suicide, or he was wandering around on the streets and living under a bridge, do you think this would be a tremendous priority for Doug Collins?
Well, I don't disagree with you, Chris. I'm not trying to give him a pass, but I did hear it when Darin said that he has the least political appointees of any agency. So he has the least members on his team that have his back of any agency. And that's just a tough spot to be in. Now, I will say, and this is something we talked about, I haven't heard Doug Collins speak up in any of these cabinet meetings. I don't know anything about what he's doing. Now, maybe it's not something that I've been looking for, but I have not heard very much from him. So I pray that he is doing what it takes and positioning, trying to get the people into place to do what needs to be done. But I can say it sounds like Darin's not sure of that. And if he's not sure of it, I certainly can't be sure of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a very good point. It is the entire bureaucratic structure of the Veterans Administration is pitted against Doug Collins and pitted against anybody, I think, who wants to institute real reform and real accountability. No doubt about that.
And look, I'll tell you one other thing, Chris. I would be so pleased. You know what? If they would go in and just fire way more people than they need to, why not? Why not just fire more people than you need to fire, so that way you can build back in a way that's going to be healthy and provide the kind of care and access that people deserve. If you get it wrong, if you fire some good people, so what? It happens every single day in corporate America.
Yeah. I mean, if they just fired 10 rotten apples for every 50 or 100 that they hire, maybe we would be in better shape. Who knows? But I cannot think of any issue, Danielle, that evokes such emotion and anger in me, that the very agency that is supposed to be serving and protecting and healing these men and women are destroying their lives. And I guarantee you there is a direct link between the way many of these soldiers have been treated by the VA and their ultimate decision to kill themselves. There's no question about it. And you have people like Jeremy Harrell and others out there, Boone Cutler, who are doing so much good, and the VA tries to destroy them. They can't just say, look, I know we're incompetent, And we don't like veterans for whatever reason. But you know what? Let's at least be decent enough not to try to cut the legs out from under other nonprofit organizations who really are trying to fill the vacuum left by our black morass of incompetence and hostility in this agency. Let's at least leave them alone. But they can't even do that.
Yeah.
They
and
want to,
if you think about them going after outsiders that way, imagine what it's like to be a good person, a good
on the inside,
honorable person on the inside. It's just that bad. They are that vicious.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. And again, Danielle, just for me to round out here, this is the very reason why Thomas Jefferson said we have to have a government that is simple and frugal and accountable. That's what Thomas Jefferson said. And this is just the opposite of what he prescribed and recommended. And look at the result of it. Well, I hope that, that Doug Collins does what he needs to do. Again, this should be his number one priority, to clean this up. Because right now, Danielle, because of all this incompetence in the VA, what did he say? 68, 65%, 66% of these veterans are having to get private insurance that they're having to pay for. That's another disgrace of the whole deal. Why should a military hero have to pay anything for health care? Hell, illegal immigrants in this country aren't paying for their health care. But you have military veterans paying out of pocket, God knows how much, for their health care? That's a disgrace, an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, it's worse than a disgrace. I agree with you.
Anyway, I know people, the reason why I'm emotional about this is because I know guys who are suffering tremendously because of the incompetence in the VA. And it's just an issue that resonates with me for that reason. Not only because I know these guys personally, but just because it is so fundamentally unjust.
It is.
And that's it for me.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely unjust, Chris. And I'm just grateful that we had an opportunity to give voice to this issue today. I think it's an underspoken about issue. It's an under-recognized issue, and one that we need to amplify. So we'll encourage everyone to go to veteranaction.org and take action. Let your legislators know that you believe that our veterans deserve better, and you expect them to vote in a way that reflects that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And just one announcement. Tomorrow I'll be back on For the Love of Freedom, 10 a.m. Central, and I will have Praying Medic back with me for what's proving to be, I think it will be a very fun show. We're going to talk about the precious metals market. We're going to talk about peace in the Middle East, and we're going to be talking about some of the memes that are coming out of the Trump administration to destroy the left. So I think it'll be a fun show tomorrow. So please tune in for that if you will.
Yes, and continue to support the state of freedom. We love you, and we are your voice, and will continue to be your voice, especially and including the voice of our military heroes who are struggling and dying because of the incompetence of our government. And we're going to continue to plead their cause. freedomstate.us. Also support LACAG. I think, Danielle, maybe there are some things that can be done on the state level that we can explore in order to provide relief for our military veterans.
Yeah.
So,
and,
God bless.
And one more thing, Chris, I'm sorry. And I also want to mention just about our show on Thursday. On Thursday, we will have Theodis Daniel with us. He is a congressional candidate running for Texas's 18th district, and he is the father of DJ Daniel, the I call the youngest or the hardest working law enforcement agent in the country. He's the 13-year-old little boy that President Trump called out at the State of the Union address. He has had 13 brain surgeries, an amazing young man, and what a beautiful testament to resilience and courage. Their whole family is just beautiful. So we are really looking forward to having him on Thursday, hearing about his candidacy and hearing about what he believes he can bring to the table for the state of Texas.
The young boy, Danielle, the young boy who President Trump introduced and the Democrats refused to stand up and acknowledge, the young boy with brain cancer who's showing such courage. In my view, they're on the same level with the VA bureaucrats. The same level with the VA bureaucrats. That degree of black-heartedness and selfishness is just extraordinary. We'll end on a high note here because we have a lot to be thankful for, but that's where I stand on it. And God bless you, Danielle. It's always a pleasure being with you. And I thank God that we...
Yeah, me too. God bless you, Chris. Meet the world's first living, full-spectrum, certified organic CBDA hemp extract. Ness's hemp oil was extracted from seed to bottle without chemicals, solvents, or heavy metals, and it surpasses world-class standards for purity. This pure and powerful CBDA has been proven to reduce aches and pains, ease mental tension, and promote better sleep. To get yours today, visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit LACAG.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.